Hello and welcome. It's time for another edition of True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Tim will be with me in a little bit as we cover dumb crimes and stupid criminals. This is going to be a very different type of case than we cover on our show normally. But this story is so bizarre, so twisted, and so many turns. It's like something you would see in an episode of General Hospital or Dynasty or some nighttime soap opera. It's just one of those inconceivable stories that there's no way could be true, but it is. Paul Franczak is joining us. He is a military veteran and former actor who now works for a nonprofit organization devoted to saving lives. 5 years ago, Paul took a DNA test that disproved the story that he had been told about his identity. And we're going to hear about this story. His book is called The Foundling, the true story of a kidnapping, a family secret, and my search for the real me. Paul Franczak is joining us. He is a military veteran and former actor who now works for a nonprofit organization devoted to saving lives. 5 years ago, Paul took a DNA test that disproved the story that he had been told about his identity. Let's jump to the start of this, Paul, and thank you so much for agreeing to be with us to share this story. I think this is something unique to bring to our true crime tale. Give us a little background on Paul Franczak and what happened back in 1964 in April back in Chicago.
All right, so back in April of 1964, Mrs. and Mr. Franczak had a baby in Michael Reese Hospital. When that baby was less than a day old, still in the hospital, someone dressed like a nurse came in and told Mrs. Franczak that the doctor had to see the baby. Took the baby out of Mrs. Franczak's arms and was gone, just vanished, not without a trace. And that was the beginning of this whole crazy journey.
So baby Paul is taken by a mysterious person dressed as a nurse, and they were able to find out this person was not a nurse at any hospitals, local or in the surrounding area there, correct? She had no ties to this hospital at any point?
Well, no one even knew who she was.
Okay.
And she fit in except for she wasn't wearing a nurse's cap. The strange part was she abducted Paul at 10 a.m. The hospital didn't notify Mrs. Franczak till almost 4 p.m. that night.
Was it just, I understand things are much different than they are today. Were they even aware that the baby had gone missing, or was that the frantic search from 10 till 4 to try to rectify this before the mother knew?
They had a feeling the baby was missing, but they didn't want to tell Mrs. Franczak. They thought that hopefully it would turn up, and then they wouldn't have to say a word about it. And it didn't work out that way. When
they tell your mother what happened, how does she react?
Well, what they did was they actually called Mr. Franczak, who was at work, and said, "We think your child's missing. You need to get to the hospital." So my dad had to go and tell my mom that the baby's missing.
Well, that's definitely a different time nowadays. All right. How quickly is the FBI called in and local law enforcement? How long does it take to start this case really moving and looking for you?
Okay, everything moved really fast. They actually notified 200 police officers and FBI. They descended on Southside Chicago quickly. They searched 600 homes, interviewed 1,000 people by midnight. And the next day, the Postmaster General pledged 175,000 letter carriers to go and conduct a door-to-door search. It was huge.
That is historic. Has there ever been anything done like that before or since? I've never heard of letter carriers getting involved.
No, it was a major effort for the city to try to solve this as quick as they possibly could.
So they have everybody that they possibly could out looking for this baby, this missing child. What happens? I mean, how long is this going on, and how long till they eventually find a little boy that seems to fit this bill?
Well, they did this for about a week, and then the FBI actually moved in with my parents, and they stayed with them for a couple of weeks. They had their phones tapped. They went through, fake ransom calls and, all those kind of things. But they never caught, or they never even came close to finding what happened to Paul. The closest they had was that the fake nurse took a cab driven by this guy named Lee Kelsey. They interviewed him. He was cleared. And he just said he dropped her off on Halstead Street, and that's it. She just vanished.
He didn't ask he didn't ask at that time why the nurse was taking a baby out of the hospital and why he was just dropping her off on Halstead?
I've asked myself that a million times. I mean, as a cab driver, you would think, why is this nurse carrying a baby wrapped up in a blanket, obviously a newborn, right? I mean, it's just,
right.
I don't know.
So she gets dropped off on Halstead. Is there any trace of her from that moment on?
No, she vanished, complete, without a trace. That was it.
Now, there's a span of 2 years, as I understand, between the vanishing and your appearance. What took place during that 2-year span?
So on the Franzak side, they were pretty much withdrawn. I mean, as you can imagine, this tragedy happened to them.
Right.
And it's something, I mean, you just don't get over that. And so they just kept to themselves. I was found abandoned almost a year and a half later in Newark, New Jersey. And according to police, I guess the FBI checked out over 10,000 different babies. And when they came across me, I was the only one they couldn't really rule out as being a Franzak child. But when I was found, I was placed into the system in New Jersey, put into a foster home for almost a year. And then all of a sudden, the FBI showed up and said, we think this is the Franzak boy.
All right. So when you were found abandoned, where were you found? What was the story behind that moment?
I was found abandoned outside of McCrory's Variety Store, which was like the hottest store on Broad Street in New Jersey. This store was so popular back in the 60s, they actually had their own private subway entrance and departure platform inside the store. So everybody went shopping at McCrory's. I was found outside the front door in a stroller.
All right. Just what strange aspects of this case. So they find you. They put you into the system because nobody's claiming you. How long does it take from the time they find you till they start to think, maybe this is the Franzak kid?
I believe I was in the foster home for a couple of months when a police officer from New Jersey decided to contact the authorities in Chicago and said, I think we might have found the Franzak baby. Because this was still, the Franzak case was still a hot going case that wasn't solved. And it wasn't, it was a different time back then. We didn't have all these kidnappings and all these tragic things happen to kids. It really dominated the news for a long time.
And what about you specifically rang out to this police officer? This might be the kid from Chicago. I mean, again, you'd think they've got enough stuff going on in their own neck of the woods, but you stood out. Why did he reach out and say, we think this is your missing boy?
That's a great question. Something about, I guess, my look, my age, of what they thought, how old I was, just really struck out with this guy. This one cop really must have had a connection with the Franzak kidnapping to think about that, because that's pretty far away.
Right.
New Jersey, Chicago.
So within a few months, they look into this. The FBI gets involved. Why, if they believe you are the missing child for this family, why does it take almost a year before you're brought to them?
Well, first they had to rule out the other 10,000 kids, supposedly, and it was all based on the shape of my ear, because Paul was only in the hospital for about 16 hours before he was abducted. Hospital never took a footprint, never did a blood type, never did anything, but they had this one picture of Paul, and it's the only picture we have of Paul to this day. And the only way they could do it was by the shape of the ears.
Subscribe now for True Crime Tuesday by visiting darknessradio.com and clicking the True Crime Tuesday banner. Never miss another episode of True Crime Tuesday and Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals. Go there now, darknessradio.com, and click on the True Crime Tuesday banner. Do it now.